a land of mysterious ascetics and astonishing mathematics. The first true chapter of Indian history dates back to around 3000 BC, preserving the ancient civilization of mystery. The Indus civilization, which originated around the Indus River, is particularly famous for its remarkable urban planning. The major archaeological sites of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa represent highly developed urban civilizations. Like modern new cities, wide roads intersected at right angles, and houses built with baked bricks were arranged in a grid pattern. There were 2-story houses, and each house was equipped with a bathroom and a garden. The buildings, including residential ones, had drainage systems for disposing of used water, and there were dedicated outlets for disposing of garbage. Particularly in Mohenjo-Daro, there was a huge public bathing facility. The deepest part of this large bathhouse was 2.4 meters deep, featuring several rooms, presumably used by priests. In Harappa, large grain storage facilities were discovered. Surprisingly, no opulent palaces or grand temples were found in these two cities. Other ancient civilizations of the time were often dominated by strong religious influence and operated under centralized power with a vertical hierarchy. For example, the pyramid-building Egyptian civilization stands in stark contrast. Mesopotamian society also developed around temples, and there was a vertical hierarchy between the king and the common people. In Mohenjo-Daro, rather than temples, residential areas were more developed. Thus, it is speculated that the Indus society might have had an egalitarian social structure without strong political power. One certainty is that the ancient script, still not fully deciphered, keeps many aspects veiled in secrecy. The precise reasons for the decline of the splendid Indus civilization around 1500 BC are not clear. It remains the only one among the 4 major civilizations whose script has not been deciphered. Someday, if the script is deciphered, we will face the true face of ancient India. After the fall of the Indus civilization, the land saw numerous changes in rulership. One notable aspect was that the invaders almost always came via the northwestern routes because, to the south of India lay the ocean, the northeast was covered in dense forests, and the north was blocked by the massive Himalayas. The original settlers of the Indus civilization are presumed to have been the Dravidians. The new era on the foundation of the Indus civilization was ushered in by the Aryans. The Aryans were characterized by their fair skin, high noses, and large stature. Originally nomadic pastoralists from the Central Asian steppes, they gradually began entering India around 2000 BC. Over time, they slowly assimilated with the indigenous Dravidian people. Previously, it was widely believed that the Aryans were responsible for the destruction of the Indus civilization, but today it is seen that the Aryans gradually merged with the native people. The Indus civilization was already in decline, possibly due to natural issues like climate change that devastated the river basins, and the arrival of the Aryans delivered the final blow. The Dravidians, who had established a sophisticated civilization, had no choice but to cede the spotlight to the iron-armed Aryans. Especially, the mobility of horse-drawn chariots and carts was a revolutionary invention of the time. On the splendid foundation laid by the Dravidians of the Indus civilization, the Aryans grafted the new Vedic civilization. As the Indus and Vedic civilizations blended seamlessly, a unique culture began to flourish in India. The nomadic Aryans who settled in the northwestern part of India gradually took to agriculture, using iron agricultural tools. They cleared lands and moved eastward along the Ganges River. During their nomadic days, horses were crucial, but as they took up farming, cattle became more important. Thus, in India, cows are still regarded as sacred and revered beings, and are left to roam freely in the streets. During the Vedic period led by the Aryans, the foundational roots of Indian society were formed, especially the practices of venerating cows, domesticating elephants, and wearing turbans became apparent. Above all, during the Vedic period, the famous caste system was established. The racially superior Aryans, having conquered the indigenous dark-skinned people, emphasized their supremacy by dividing society based on skin color, which was the Varna system. As the society became more complex and mixed race, the job-based caste system eventually emerged. The highest caste in the caste system were the Brahmins, who performed rituals for the gods, followed by the Kshatriyas, the ruling class of warriors and royals, then the Vaishyas, the class of traders and commoners, and at the bottom, the Shudras, the laborer and servant class. However, there was an even lower class that didn't fit into these 4 categories, commonly known as the Dalits or Untouchables. In the 1930s, Mahatma Gandhi proposed calling them Harijains, meaning children of God, but today they are mostly referred to as Dalits. Historically treated as less than human, untouchables were often killed for merely coming into contact with a higher caste. Although the caste system is legally banned in modern India, the discrimination rooted in thousands of years of caste hierarchy still underlies Indian society. Even today, Dalits in India typically handle societal rejects such as carcasses, food waste, and excreta, occupying the most despised and menial jobs. Furthermore, they face discrimination in education and employment opportunities, trapping them in a cycle of low social status. Today, Dalits are classified along with ethnic minorities from mountainous regions as scheduled castes, making up 1 in every 4 people in the population. The class immediately above the Dalits, the Shudras, are classified as other backward classes, accounting for 1 in every 2 people in the population. The upper 3 castes, Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Brahmins, are collectively classified as general castes, comprising 1 in every 4 people in the population. In India, due to the accumulation of information over long periods, one can often guess another's caste just by hearing their surname. Since ancient times, Indians have believed that caste hierarchies were determined by the gods. Everyone is born into a predetermined caste. This raises the question, on what basis does someone get born into a good environment and others do not? This is explained by karma from previous lives. Because of the good or bad deeds committed in past lives, one is born into their current life. What we often refer to as the burden of past lives is called karma in Sanskrit. Sanskrit, being the language of the Aryans, was predominantly used by the upper caste, while ordinary people spoke Prakrit, derived from Sanskrit. During the Vedic period led by the Aryans, they adhered to the primitive religion of Brahmanism. The priestly caste, the Brahmins, compiled religious texts, which became India's first scriptures, the Vedas. The Vedic scriptures detail the purposes and methods of performing sacrifices to the gods. The knowledge contained in the Vedas would form the basis of religion and philosophy in India for thousands of years. Because of the Aryans' Vedic culture, this period following the Indus civilization is called the Vedic period. By the 6th century BC, the Aryans who settled along the Ganges River had established several city-states and began engaging in intense conflicts with each other, marking the entry into the period of the 16 Great Kingdoms. In an atmosphere of ongoing large and small wars aimed at unification, challenges to the top caste, the Brahmins, sitting at the top of the pyramid, began, especially as the Kshatriyas, as royalty, came to hold substantial political power. They inevitably clashed with the Brahmins at the top of the caste system. To challenge the Brahmins' stronghold on Brahmanism, a new religion and philosophy were needed. This led to the birth of Buddhism and Jainism. The existing Brahmin priests had made religious rituals complex to establish their authority. Without a Brahmin priest, no religious rituals could be performed. Moreover, too many cows were being sacrificed in Brahmanic rituals. Considering how many cows were needed to cultivate the vast lands near the Ganges River, it was inevitable that discontent would arise when these valuable cows were continually killed as offerings to the gods. Thus, both the Kshatriyas and the class below them, the Vaishyas, became fervent supporters of the emerging religions, Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhism and Jainism taught that personal enlightenment was more important than social status. The nobility of a person depended on their spiritual growth and practice. Especially important was the ethic that one should not kill. This meant that the precious cows would no longer be sacrificed, which greatly appealed to the farming populace. However, Jainism, while similar to Buddhism in preaching non-harm to living beings, somewhat acknowledged the traditional Brahmanic caste system. On the other hand, Buddhism firmly denied the traditional Brahmanic caste system. It stated that anyone, regardless of class, gender, or wealth, could become a practitioner. The founder of original Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, was a prince from what is now the region of Nepal. It's worth noting that Nepal, along with today's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and several other countries, were traditionally all referred to as India. The area is vast enough to compare with the whole of Western Europe, and thus it's called a subcontinent. Why, then, did the comfortable Prince Gautama decide to pursue the arduous path of renunciation? Several factors influenced Gautama's contemplative nature. Firstly, his mother passed away a week after his birth, and he belonged to the second caste, the Kshatriyas. Gautama was dissatisfied with the division of people by caste, and he deeply pondered the fundamental questions of life, death, and suffering. Thus, he eventually left his luxurious kingdom to seek the truth of the world. At the age of 35, Gautama attained enlightenment and became the Buddha, teaching various people how to escape suffering. Buddhism's teachings deeply rooted themselves throughout India. Then, in the 4th century BC, what could be described as India's own era of the warring states came to an end. The first to unify India into a single nation was Chandragupta Maurya. The Maurya Empire is one of the largest territories in Indian history, especially during the reign of the 3rd Emperor Ashoka, who unified almost all of southern India, ushering in a golden age. In many ways, Ashoka is a figure that must be remembered in Indian history. Ashoka waged the Kalinga War around 260 BC, a massive war that resulted in nearly 300,000 casualties and prisoners of war. Ashoka was deeply pained by the horrific slaughter and, after the conquest wars, devoted himself to Buddhism and practiced merciful governance. Ironically, despite Ashoka's efforts in spreading Buddhism, Buddhism eventually disappeared within India. We'll explore the detailed reasons later. After Ashoka's death, the Maurya Empire rapidly collapsed. Following the fragmentation, various ethnic groups continued to invade northwestern India, and in the 1st century AD, the era of the Kushan dynasty began. The Kushan Empire, established by a branch of the Yuezhi people, was the same Yuezhi that Jongjin of the Han dynasty sought to ally with. Some of the Yuezhi established the Kushan Empire and made their mark on Indian history. The heyday of the Kushan Empire was in the 2nd century during the reign of King Kanishka, situated right in the middle of the Silk Road. The Kushan dynasty made a fortune from intermediary trade between the Han dynasty of East Asia and Parthia in the west. Also, during the reign of King Kanishka, Buddhism spread widely to Tibet, China, and Central Asia. Both the ancient King Ashoka and King Kanishka played significant roles in the spread of Buddhism. The Kushan dynasty practiced a different branch of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism, where Buddha gradually came to be revered as a divine being. This Buddhist culture was influenced by Greek Hellenistic culture, resulting in the unique Gandhara art style. Given its origins in both Eastern and Western traditions, Gandhara art was original. One characteristic of Gandhara art is its realistic depiction. Unlike the traditional symbolic Buddhist art, which now resembled ancient Greek sculptures. While Kanishka made a significant impact on Indian history, following his death, the Kushan Empire rapidly declined. This pattern was similar to the swift collapse of the Maurya Empire after Ashoka's death. After a period of fragmentation and chaos, the Gupta Empire emerged in the 4th century. Chandragupta I established the Gupta dynasty, and by the early 5th century, under Chandragupta II, it reached a glorious golden age. During this time, the traditional Indian faith, Brahmanism, began to evolve into what we know today as Hinduism. While the Maurya Empire emphasized equality while practicing Buddhism, this made it impossible to deify royal authority. However, the Gupta dynasty felt the need to politically utilize traditional Brahmanism to strengthen and sanctify royal authority. By incorporating elements of Buddhism and Jainism and modifying them, the distinct religion of Hinduism was born. And Hinduism deeply rooted itself in the lives of the majority of Indians until the 21st century. Hinduism emerged from the ruler's desire to strengthen royal authority, rooted in traditional Brahmanism. So, in conclusion, Hinduism became an opportunity to establish the caste system. Meanwhile, the Gupta era is often called the golden age of Indian culture, art, and science. It produced Sanskrit literary works like Shakuntala, as well as masterpieces like the paintings in the Ajanta caves. Additionally, the Indian genius scholar Aryabhata made innovative contributions to astronomy and mathematics, significantly advancing human history. Moreover, it was the Indians who introduced the concept of zero in mathematics for the first time. As it enjoyed prosperity, the Gupta Empire eventually declined due to internal divisions and invasions by the nomadic Huns, disappearing into history. Subsequently, the Indian subcontinent once again entered a period of chaos with many kingdoms vying for dominance, and as new rulers emerged, the region transitioned into the medieval period. Thus, India suddenly transformed into an Islamic empire. In the next episode, we'll continue exploring the more diverse history of medieval India under Islamic rule. Thank you for watching.